Now that we've ushered in the holiday festival of Passover by reciting the Kiddush, the prayer in which we establish the holiness of the day over a cup of wine, now that we've already gone through a few more stages of the Seder, we've already told the Haggadah, told the story, answering the questions of the children. We sang Dayenu, thanking God for each one of the miracles. Each one of them would have been Dayenu, sufficient for us to praise God. And after we drank the second cup of wine, we were already more advanced than we were before. When we started to say that we were impoverished, we were slaves, we were people who just got out of the morass of Egypt, of exile, of bondage. And now we're a little bit more sophisticated, and we wash our hands again. Now, the technical reason for washing our hands is because when we eat bread, and matzah is bread, it's bread of affliction, but it's still bread, we have to wash our hands for reasons that we won't go into right now. So we're going to wash our hands now again. But there's a deeper spiritual reason, because when we washed our hands in the beginning, we explained in an earlier message, it was in order to remove the impurities that have accumulated as a result of our existence in exile. So yes, Kadesh, we were holy, God plucked us out and made us holy, but we still had these flaws that we had to get rid of when we washed ourselves. But now that we're a little bit more sophisticated, we're more advanced in the process of getting out of Mitzrayim, getting out of bondage, spiritual bondage, not just physical bondage. Now we have to reach a higher level. Now the washing of our hands is to get us from one level, a positive level, a level of holiness, to an even higher level of holiness. Because the process of the Exodus has to be a continual one, that even after you get out of one stage of bondage and you become accustomed to that stage, you have to then break out of that to go to something higher. Perhaps it parallels the two reasons given for eating matzah. One reason that we said at the very beginning of the Seder, this is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. That means that the matzah symbolizes our impoverishment. It symbolizes our slavery. It symbolizes our humbleness. But then there's another reason given in the Torah that's mentioned in the Haggadah itself, that we were on our way out of Egypt, and in such haste, we had no time for the dough to become leavened, to become chametz. And that's why we eat matzah. So the first reason describes our impoverished state of affairs, and that's what we set the tone for the beginning of the Seder. We mentioned that. But later on, as we become more sophisticated and we're ready to eat the matzah, we are now at a level where we eat matzah because it's a symbol of redemption. And that's why we wash our hands, as if to say we're cleansing ourselves from the preceding and the previous state of affairs in which we stood. And now we're going to a higher rung, to a higher position, spiritually speaking. We're experiencing a greater and a deeper level of redemption, of breaking out of constraints. So now we washed our hands and we're ready to make the bracha, the blessing on the matzah. So the next symbol is motzi. This one that we just did before was rachza, washing, and now it's motzi. Motzi refers to the blessing that we make whenever we eat bread, any kind of bread, including matzah. And that blessing is to thank God, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth the bread from the earth. What does this have to do with Passover? Well, the simple explanation is that we always have to thank God for the food that we eat, Passover or no Passover. But it has a direct connection to Passover, because as long as we don't recognize the true source of our food, we're still living in a world of Mitzrayim, a world of constraints, a world of limitations, a world of deception, if you will. You know, the child who thinks that the candy comes from the candy store, that's the source of the candy. Well, you call that infantile. Obviously, the candy comes from a factory, which comes from different parts of nature which produce the food. But if you stop at that point, you're no more sophisticated than the child, because it doesn't come from Mother Nature. Mother Nature is God's creation. God created nature and natural forces, and that's what the blessing acknowledges. So it liberates you from this very myopic view of where everything comes from. And moreover, in Kabbalah, in mystical traditions, we're told that we don't live off the food, off the nutrients in and of themselves. It's the spark of divinity that exists in everything that gives us our life. And that spark is ensconced, that spark is in captivity. You could say that it parallels our slavery. When we liberate that spark by virtue of that blessing, we generate that holiness. That's a form of exodus, of liberation as well. But then we make a second blessing. When we make the first blessing, we hold the 3 matzahs that we have at the Seder plate. It's actually 2.5 because we broke the middle matzah. And then we drop the third matzah, the bottom matzah, and we recite a second blessing in which we thank God for sanctifying us with his commandments and gave us the commandment to eat matzah. It's not just eating matzah as a symbolic thing. Eating matzah is a spiritual experience. The Zohar, the principal work of Kabbalah, tells us that matzah is bread of faith, and it's bread of healing. It enlivens and enhances our faith, and it also heals us. And every mitzvah we do, no matter what the mitzvah is, makes us holy. But there's only one mitzvah that we actually ingest the mitzvah. We eat the matzah, and it becomes internalized within us. And that's the power of matzah that gives us the experience of redemption in a very internalized fashion. Now, let's just talk a little bit about matzah, because we spoke about matzah before, that matzah is a symbol of humility. Matzah is a symbol of total submission to God who is above and beyond us. And when we eat the matzah, we're internalizing that submission. It's very interesting to note that the word matzah and the word for the antithesis of matzah, which is chametz, are almost identical. They both share 2 Hebrew letters, the mem and the tzadik. The difference is the third letter. Chametz has a letter ches. Ches has a horizontal line and 2 vertical lines that touch the horizontal line. And the word matzah has, instead of the ches, it has a hey. Same thing, horizontal line, 1 vertical line on the right, and another vertical line on the left. So what's the difference? The difference is that the hey, the left leg, the left vertical line, doesn't touch the roof. What does that symbolize? The letter ches and the letter hey are open on the bottom. That means we have the potential of sliding downward, of slipping and ending up in the abyss. The ches has no way out. There's no escape. Chametz is a personality who is ego-driven, who is egocentric. That person has no escape valve to liberate himself or herself from that state of mind. The matzah, on the other hand, has that little opening on the top, on the left side, which enables the person who is perhaps drawn downward to defy that motion and to escape through that opening, because the humility, the submission to God, makes us receptive to God's will. And that's what eating matzah does. Eating matzah enhances our faith in God. It enhances our understanding of what God means to us. And that's what we accomplish every time we eat matzah. And that's what gets us and enhances our ability to get out of Mitzrayim, to get out of our own internal exile.